Something is happening behind the scenes at Joyce Meyer Ministries that nobody saw coming. After 2 decades on Dire TV, Joyce suddenly vanished from the network in 2025. The official reason was kept quiet, but leaked documents tell a different story. It involves serious allegations that go beyond money this time. Her ministry is scrambling to find new platforms while dealing with a major audience drop. Insiders say this could be the beginning of the end. The woman who built a $100 million empire now faces her darkest hour. What really happened at Dire? Joyce Meyer came into the world as Pauline Joyce Hutcherson on June 4, 1943 in South St. Louis. It was the start of World War II, and the city felt heavy with change, but her home felt even heavier. Her father, a machinist, was drafted into the Army the very day she was born. He left almost at once, and for 3 years he was gone. From June 1943 to June 1946. When he finally walked back into the house, nothing was the same. War had carved something dark into him. He drank more, spoke less, and carried a kind of anger that filled every room. Money was already tight, and now the emotional weight grew worse. The working-class blocks around her might have looked close and steady, but inside her house there was only tension. The fear that settled in those early years stayed with her layer by layer, becoming the ground her childhood stood on. As she grew older, the damage inside her father began to spill everywhere. His drinking turned into control and then into abuse. Joyce was around 5 when the rules started to feel strange. Soon the punishments grew harsher and the isolation began. She watched other kids play freely while she lived in a house where even small mistakes brought heavy consequences. By 1946, when she was only 3, she says the sexual abuse had already begun. It was a secret that lived in the walls. Her mother, scared and bruised from her own battles with him, kept silent. That silence made everything worse. Joyce learned early that nobody was coming to help her, and it made her feel trapped in a world she could not escape. Meanwhile, her mother's strength slowly slipped away. Years of being hit, blamed, and ignored wore her down. By the time Joyce was 7, she was moving through life without the anchor of a present mother. She carried her own emotions, her own pain, and the burden of what happened behind closed doors. There were days she searched for comfort and found nothing. Moments when her mother walked out of the room instead of stepping in. Every time it happened, Joyce felt another small piece of herself fall away. The loneliness shaped her and the ache stayed. Still, something inside her began to look for a different kind of light. That light first appeared when she was 9. In 1952, sitting in a small school in South St. Louis, she opened a Bible and started reading it on her own. It felt like a quiet doorway into a softer place. The words about love and forgiveness felt like gentle hands reaching toward her. She kept reading, and little by little she started to feel a new strength enter her life. Then something stirred in her heart, and she became a born-again Christian. For a moment, she hoped it would lift the darkness around her home. But the very night she returned from church, the abuse continued. Instead of protection, her faith made her feel even more alone because the family still looked religious from the outside. Inside, nothing changed. The abuse began happening about once a week, and it continued for nearly a decade. Those years from 1952 to 1962 were filled with a silence so deep it almost swallowed her. The abuse worsened as she got older. Joyce later said her father hurt her at least once a week from age 10 until she turned 18. That added up to more than 200 incidents, each one leaving a mark that no one else could see. He used fear to keep her quiet. He used lies to make her feel guilty. He told her what would happen if she spoke up, and she believed him. He even targeted other girls in the neighborhood. But Joyce bore the most frequent attacks. Everything was planned carefully. Everything relied on silence. And the silence felt endless. Around her early teens, something even darker entered the picture. Her father began using pornography to control her. He forced her to watch it, to confuse her, to break her sense of self. It made her feel strange around other kids, ashamed, different. Schoolwork slipped. She stopped inviting friends home because she knew what he might do. By the time she turned 12, she believed she was worthless, not just because of what he did, but because of what he told her every day. Every insult chipped away at her mind. Every threat sank deeper, and her mother's quiet suffering in the background only made the loneliness sharper. The guilt, the fear, and the confusion wrapped around her life like a tight rope. Her mother's silence was one of the deepest wounds. Joyce longed for someone to stand up for her, but her mother was caught in her own web of fear. She chose silence because she could not bear the shame that would come if she spoke out. Years later, she admitted it. She said she could not face the scandal. The apology came too late. It could not erase the nights Joyce felt abandoned in her own home. That silence taught her the hardest lesson of her youth. Sometimes the person you hope will protect you cannot do it. At 18 in 1961, she finally ran. She left the house with the pain still fresh and the memories still raw. She had little money and no real support. She worked as a secretary in a local insurance office, taking whatever jobs helped her survive. Even after leaving home, fear stayed close behind her. The years of abuse had carved anxiety and mistrust into her life. But the moment she stepped outside that house, she took her first breath of freedom, even if it was shaky. Her first marriage came fast. She was young and desperate for someone to treat her differently. Instead, she ended up with a man she later called a con artist. He lied. He cheated. He stole. He left her stranded twice, once with nothing but a dime and a carton of soda bottles in California. The marriage lasted 5 painful years before ending in 1966. She went back to her parents' home, a place already stained with old memories. Soon she entered a second marriage, hoping for stability, but that too came with emotional storms. These early relationships left her wounded, bitter, and angry, unsure of where to go next. By 1965, just 22 years old, she had her first child, Laura. She lived in a tiny apartment and worked full-time as a bank teller. She barely had enough money to cover basic needs. Depression crept into her life. Old trauma, mixed with new responsibilities, and the weight of it pressed on her chest every day. Counseling helped in moments, but never truly reached the roots of her pain. She felt lost in her own mind, battling anger, fear, and guilt. Some days were so heavy she struggled to do simple things. Yet, in the middle of all that darkness, she slowly started reaching toward faith again. It took years, but those small steps became the beginning of her healing and the foundation of the ministry she would build in the future. Joyce Meyer was 33 in 1976 when something happened that stayed with her for the rest of her life. She was driving to work early in the morning, tired and frustrated, praying in the same way she had prayed many times before. Then something shifted. She later said she heard her name being called 3 times, clear and personal, filling her car with a presence that shook her. It startled her and thrilled her at the same time. She had been a Christian since childhood, yet she felt empty in those years, almost lost inside her own routine. That day felt different. It felt like a voice reaching straight into the places she kept quiet. She went home that night feeling almost drunk with the Spirit of God. The feeling stayed with her. It settled into her bones and changed how she prayed, how she read Scripture, and even how she understood herself. It was the moment that pushed her from being someone who believed quietly into someone who wanted direction and action. Soon after this turning point, she started small. She gathered a few coworkers during lunch breaks and opened a Bible with them. She had asked her pastor what to study first, and he pointed her toward a Thompson Chain Reference Bible. She opened it to John 1 verse 1 and began teaching from there. At first, it was only 25 or 30 people, but they kept coming back every Tuesday night, no matter if it rained or snowed. They liked how she talked about problems they faced at home and at work. She talked about her own struggles. She was honest when she was learning something difficult. The group grew so quickly that she added another study on Thursday afternoons at a friend's house. That second group ran for 5 years. People came because the lessons felt real and simple